Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Cramer. Today, we are going to talk about a different type of speaking with more consciousness from your heart in a way that really connects with your audience. And we have a special guest with us today, Miroslav Petrovic. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for having me.
Now, I want you to give us a little bit of a background on who you are and what it is that you do, so that as we're going through this interview over the next 20 to 30 minutes, our listeners have an understanding of who it is that they are listening to.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. So really briefly, on the current side of things, I'm a TedX speaker. I run the Enliven Speaking Institute. I've been saying over 10 years now, I've been doing different works in terms of teaching, speaking, facilitating, and really recognizing that all of these for me are like branches of the same tree. Like when we work with groups, it's a very similar skill set we're using to apply in different ways. And for me, there's been a fascination of what happens when we expand our skill set to include all of these. And I guess the difference with me is sometimes people are like, I know I want to be a speaker and I'm going to learn and I'm going to study hard and all of that kind of stuff. And my journey was quite different in that I came to Australia as a refugee. I couldn't speak the language. Very early on, I started stuttering. I kept stuttering up until maybe my early 20s when I started learning to meditate. And meditation was like this reconnection to myself, which then also opened the doorway to public speaking, which if you'd asked me like previously to that, could never imagine myself being in front of people. So speaking became more like a soul path or life birthing itself through me. I don't really know where I would be without it. It's like I can't imagine myself being happy doing any other job that doesn't give me that level of connection that speaking does.
That's powerful. So whenever we are, we'll say, lovingly pushed into a certain area, it does seem that there is a little bit more power in that than just, I mean, let's face it. I see it all the time in society. What do we do to children? What do we do to someone who is sometimes in middle school, high school, right? What are you going to be? What are you going to be when you grow up? And you're just supposed to somehow know that you're going to be happy doing that thing and you're going to fit nicely into that box and everything is going to be rainbows and butterflies after that. And that's just not the way life works. Mm-hmm. So when you're working with, and I assume that many of your clientele are business owners in some capacity. So they're getting out there and they're sharing their message, something that they're really inspired about, right? They're wanting to make a difference. When these people are going through this process with you, what are you seeing? I'm just curious, like, what is some of like what are they being called to do? Do they feel like, oh, I want to be a speaker? Are they doing it just because they want to grow their business? What does that typically look like?
This is a really good question. So I'm going to answer it in two ways. I feel a lot of the time when people come to work with me, it's a much deeper call. It's like if they just wanted to do it for the business and the growth, it's like, yeah, they can get that. But are they willing to go through the fire of transformation that's going to have them get there? Because my work is so deeply entwined with authenticity and bringing all of you to the stage, it's like you can't really fake that. I can't slap techniques on top of what's underneath the surface to suppress what's in there so you can get a required result without being yourself. It's like we're going to create the result for you being more of yourself, which can be vulnerable, which can be opening, which also invites you to, or invites people to find that level of authenticity in the rest of their life. Early on for me, when I started getting on stages and people would ask me, how can you just get up there without a microphone and speak like that? I realized after a bit, it's like, because I'm doing this in my whole life. Like I'm continually meeting the edge of my life so I can be myself more fully. And when I step onto the stage, it's no different. It's just like, it's a different intensity because it's the stage and I'm being watched. And what I discovered as I started working with people is it's like they need to have a taste for that in their life. It's like, if you want to, I have one example coming to mind, like a woman that asked to work with me, and we're having this conversation. I was like, okay, if you were to step into this and do this work with me and create the kind of results you're wanting to create, what else would have to change in your life? And she was like, oh, I'd have to leave my partner. I was like, yeah, that's it. And I didn't know the story between her and her partner, but when she said it, it just felt true. And she's like, yeah, I don't want to do that. But it's this sense, it's like, okay, so it's like, it's a path that's not for everyone, because the invitation is to bring all of ourselves to the stage and to create real and lasting connection, as opposed to getting up and presenting a beautifully crafted PowerPoint presentation, which has no life or soul or depth, but it looks perfect, which kind of sounds like a metaphor for a lot of, like, I would say mainstream culture. Is that useful? Is that answering the question?
Yeah, what you're talking about is pretty profound, because what I feel like we're tapping into right now is for those individuals who really are feeling that more deep and profound, more meaningful calling to be of service in their unique way. And that does require authenticity. That does require being really vulnerable so that you can shed away all of the lies and the limitations that have been holding you back.
Mm. And for me, there's a real power in here, whereas the stage becomes one of the most powerful tools for personal transformation and for discovering who we are. Because it's like, if we're willing to keep meeting that fire, it's going to strip back anything that isn't real and that is pretending. But it's approaching the stage from a very different place. It's not what I call the high school model of write down your speech and then memorize it and then get up and recite it in front of people. Like, that's not public speaking. That's like reciting. Like, you're reciting from inside your head, but there's no connection with the audience. It's like, what does it take to let people in and for us to really see people and then communicate from that place? And that level of connection then bleeds into all other parts of our lives, with our families, with our children, with our lovers. It's just, it's like ever giving. It's like finding a fountain of youth or something like that.
There's really no separation between our business and our personal, because both of them are being created, through us, from us. So when you see these people who are almost living a lie, it's like a facade, maybe in their business, and then at home, they're a completely different person, there's such a disconnect. And I think that most people can feel that, even if you're not necessarily empathic or highly sensitive. On some level, the subconscious mind is picking up on that inauthenticity, and it does create a barrier. So, and I've seen it with clients over the years where they have almost like this self-image, like separate self-images, right? So they have a self-image of themselves in their professional life, and then they have a self-image of themselves in their personal life. But whenever there is that separation there, that incongruency, it creates all sorts of challenges internally and externally. So what you're sharing here is that when you start to unravel that stuff and you really start to get in tune with who you are, it does have that spillover effect. Yeah, it can help you grow your business in a more meaningful, authentic way, but it's also going to change you, the person, and who you are with your family, with your spouse, with your children, and just the person that you're being in general.
Completely. And on a very like metrics level, I think of it like this: if you're going to spend 40 hours to learn, memorize, and recite a talk and give it once, that's a massive waste of time and energy. If you're repeating this talk like 3 times a month for the next year, sure, it's a good use of energy. Most people aren't, unless your main thing is just being a professional speaker, you're giving talks every now and again. But spending 40 hours that connects you to the depth of yourself, which means every time you step into life and onto the stage, you have more of a resource and more of a wealth. It's like, that's an investment that's going to keep paying off forever. Like, it doesn't change. And I've found when people meet the stage from here, like, I had a woman contact me. She enrolled to work with me, and she'd just heard me speak, and she messaged me going, I just love your message. Now, the message, if you've been on the stage, it's like every business coach is like, you need to have a message. Or even if you're in business, at least in personal brands, it's like, you need to have a message. What's your message? And I remember giggling, because this used to give me so much grief when I was younger, like finding this elusive message thing. And I laughed when she said it to me, and I was like, that's really funny. I didn't say what my message was. And she was like, Miroslav, you didn't have to, I could feel it. And I feel that's the difference. It's like, when that level of felt transmission is moving through the space, it's like the words don't really matter as much. They matter, but you're going to bring people with you because it's just real and authentic. And I don't know, I think of Braveheart. He wasn't sitting there writing the perfect speech. He was like, my heart is on the line. Are you willing to join me in what I'm doing?
We could go off on a whole metaphysical tangent on what you just said there. I will refrain.
Let's bring it back to business.
Yeah. But it's powerful when you embody your message in that way, because it does translate in more than just words. You're conveying it energetically.
Yeah.
On a really practical level, when you don't have that clarity within your business, you're sort of, your message falls on deaf ears. There's no resonance there. So when somebody is, even if they're scrolling through their social media feed and there's your ad, when you don't have that clarity within yourself, you're just putting stuff out there and it's sort of just lackluster. It doesn't have really any energy, any meaning behind it. And I think that it's unfortunate how many really beautiful, well-meaning business people are so busy doing stuff, so busy with all of the tactics and the mechanics, that they forget that their business really is an extension of themselves, and that if they want to connect with the right types of clients and customers, that you've got to have that clarity within yourself, and it has to be projected out through everything that you're doing to market your business.
Completely. I had a woman that came through one of my courses, and the very first week I gave them an exercise, which was just to breathe. Now, there was research done back in the 80s by a woman named Bud Rowe, where she studied the pause time the teachers would have. So between asking a question and answering it or picking someone, she measured how long they would pause for on average. You can take a guess. Most people guess like 2 or 3 seconds, and it's less than that. It was less than a second, which for me, when I came across this, I was like, this shows us how absolutely terrified we are just of silence, of being seen, of not having something prepared to go on with, just actually letting life be for a moment. And the very first exercise I invited this group to do was, when they do their next thing on social media, their next live, is just to take a moment to breathe. And not like a long drawn out thing. It can be one breath and let there be a few seconds of a pause in there. And she did this in her private group. Now, she was the kind of woman that was very well studied with strategy, and she was very successful as a coach as well. And she did this, and straight away a woman contacted her into her inbox, and she was like, I want to sign up into your training. And she was like, this is crazy. You've been following this group, watching from like the sidelines for so long. What changed for you now? And this woman responded to her. She goes, I just felt you. Like, maybe for the first time, I just felt you. And this is really the magic of when we allow ourselves to be seen. Like, the person on the other side doesn't have to understand authenticity and embodiment and any of this. It's like their nervous system will just feel it when we're willing to meet them from that deeper level. It's like walking our talk as opposed to just talking about it continually.
that in and of itself is a huge takeaway. Just that piece right there, if someone implements that, the next time that they do, it doesn't even matter, right? It could be an interview like this. It could be speaking on stage. It could be speaking on a webinar. It could be a Facebook Live. It could even just be a conversation with a potential client or customer. It's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, completely.
So now let's talk a little bit about some of the practical side of speaking. So from your perspective, what is the value of refining your speaking ability to grow your business?
That's a really good question. So on a very practical level, and this isn't a distinction for like learning to speak with me or my style, I feel this is just speaking across the board. It's one of the quickest, most effortless ways to scale your business, because you're suddenly speaking to many people at once. And if your sales call usually goes for 20 minutes or an hour, whatever, and you sign up one person or you sell to one person, now you can do that to a multitude of people in the same amount of time. So you're drastically minimizing the amount of time and energy and effort you put into working in your business, in a sense. I feel that there's another layer here. Can you ask me the question again?
So we're talking about, on a practical level, the value of refining your speaking ability in order to use that to grow your business.
So for one, I feel a lot of people, if I draw it back to that first example, they're just leaving money on the table. They do a great speech and then they're afraid to do a sales process at the end. Or if they do one, they don't leave enough time, or they rush it, or whatever. And when we refine our speaking practice, you recognize you're selling all the time. You're selling before you've even opened up your mouth. Like, people are either buying into you or they're not. You're selling even if you don't have a product or a service to sell. Even if there's not a monetary transaction, you're selling people into your message. And it takes I'd say a great deal of tenacity to be able to keep meeting that, to be able to be a stand behind your message, to keep allowing yourself to come forth. And my sense is, when we fall into, I've got this and I know everything, it's like life stops there. I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I'm like, I'm still learning. And I don't mean I learn every now and again. I mean, every time I'm on stage, it's like the algorithm keeps growing. If you're into crypto and you're familiar with that kind of metaphor, it's like there's still more Bitcoins out in the world. Speaking as an art is not something that's complete. Like, a lot of the stuff that I've been doing and refining, people have never taught me. It's just through continually getting in the stage and merging what I've come to know through meditation and the silences of the world into the world of speaking and expression, that it's like whole new pathways are emerging that didn't exist. So when someone says to me, it's like, I know I can do that. And then they also tell me, I had a webinar and no one bought from me. I'm like, well, okay, you sure, you can speak and you might be comfortable speaking on stage, but unless this is practically growing your business in ways we can track, you're just speaking. You're not really touching people. And you might be touching them, but you're not moving them. And the difference is, early on, I would speak and people would come up and tap me on the back and go, that was a really good talk, thanks. And I'd still be broke after that because no one was buying my stuff, compared to when I started refining the skills. It's like, okay, now I'm speaking and people are like, that was amazing. And they're like, how can I work with you? And that's really where we want to be moving towards. And I'm going to touch on this a bit more. When we get stuck in techniques and strategy, it can be a very, very mental process. It's like, if you've ever been sold to by someone that's just read the manual on sales, and they kind of approach and they're drilling you, and they're just asking you the questions they need to get an outcome, it's almost dehumanizing. And for me, there's a very natural sales process that's been emerging from my work, and not just my other people's as well, but it's something that I've been really invested in mining, if you will, and really finding the nuances of how can we do this in the most authentic way possible, where it feels like an invitation and not a forcing. It's like flipping the whole mechanism of the sales process. So it's more about an embodied invitation and a realization into what's possible if we step into that world, and less about, can I just run this technique? Now, you can run a technique just by revising it enough times. If you want to go into invitation-based sales, it's more like, how deeply can I open myself? And how deeply can I let people feel me? Because it's a magnetic process. And they're going to feel magnetized to that, as opposed to being pushed with, if you don't do this, you're never going to make it in life, fear-based sales tactics and all that kind of stuff. So
Love
if I was
that.
like, if we're looking at it on a purely business level, I would say, what's your conversion like? How much are you enjoying it? And are people enjoying the process? Are they reaching out to you afterwards going, that was amazing. Can you come back and speak again?
Good stuff. So I'm going to pivot slightly.
Mm.
I want to talk to you about you as the business owner. So can you share with us something that maybe you've had to overcome with your own mindset in order to get to where you are currently?
Yeah. What's how wide out do you want to go with this?
Well, this is one of those loaded questions. So I always say we don't need the entire autobiography, but maybe like one big thing that was kind of monumental for you when you made that shift. It really opened things up for you.
Okay. I'd say the biggest shift is recognizing that fear is the doorway. And this is essentially what my TED talk was on. But so many times we avoid what we're afraid of, and we avoid it unconsciously. We'll say, no, that's not for me. That's not who I am. It's not time yet. I'm waiting for the right time. I need a sign from the universe, like whatever your version of avoiding your own truth is. And sometimes those things can be true. I find most of the time they're just avoiding what's inside, are all just ways that we use to avoid fear. And if I kind of take this onto what we're talking about, which is speaking, like the first time I went into doing a sales process on the stage, was a room of 200 people. And I was like, great. And who wants to work with me? And I put my hand up, and the room was like a dead sea, like no one was moving. And now externally, I had this awareness. I was like, I was absolutely terrified of doing this. I've been like the shy, quiet boy that never wanted to offend anyone. That was, like always in people's good books. And I was like, everyone hates me right now. It's like the worst possible scenario that was in my head just happened in the real world. And on one side, I'm like, this looks really bad. Inside, I was like, this is exciting. I've just walked through the doorway of what I fear the most. And it's actually not that bad. I just survived. And these things have like a way of showing up. Like, even though no one got up, 3 people came up to me at the back table and signed up. And a couple of the other speakers were like, man, I really felt for you. And that was really hard. And I was like, no, you don't get it. People still signed up. And even if they didn't, I just had the best experience I could have hoped for. Like, I walked through my biggest fears and they couldn't stop me. And that's just become a metaphor for so many other things in my life. It's like, when people first looking to start get on stages and they're like, but I'm afraid what my uncle or brother or mentor will think. I'm like, good, let's start with inviting them in. Give them a free ticket to your next show. Like, meet that edge that you feel is out there in the world so you can move through it inside yourself. Now, I don't really it's partially mindset, but for me, it's also a lifestyle. It's like, can we invite what we're fearing into our life experience? And I'm just going to give a disclaimer because I don't obviously know your audience intimately. Like, if you're afraid of, I don't know, a boxing match, that doesn't mean you should jump into a boxing ring. Like, I'm talking about this more
Good disclaimer.
interpersonal business life challenges, not, whatever.
If you're afraid of jumping into a pit of poisonous snakes, this is not an encouragement for that
exactly.
type of but it's really, really a cool example of most of our fears are the very thing that is holding us back from what it is that we really want. It's crazy. It's so crazy how many people are saying no to themselves when right on the other side of that fear is everything that they want.
Yeah. And the magic for me really, Alicia, is when we start embracing the fear itself is electric. Like, it is life. And just to allow that life in, regardless of the outcome, like for me, regardless of whether we make the sale, regardless of whether we get the dream partner, regardless of, whatever the thing, the outcome is that we're holding on to, like, the fear becomes the reward. The big distinction, and this for me was like a personal thing I discovered, but they've also done research on Tibetan monks who spent their lifetime meditating. And they found the big difference of the monks compared to most people when they studied them, was that the monks could separate the story from the sensation. So for most of us, fear comes and the mind makes that mean something. Oh, I'm going to be a failure. People won't like me, whatever. With the monks, there was just more space. It's like the fear would come and it wouldn't mean anything. It was just sensations in the body. And they could literally choose what they wanted to make that mean, or have it mean nothing and just experience as sensations. And for me, that's the invitations. It's like, yeah, I might be in a story when the fear comes, and the story is going to tell me ABC, but can I just come back to the sensations and just, as weird as it sounds, like, appreciate or enjoy those sensations for what they are, because they're going to dissolve. And when they do, the story does as well. And there's not as much of a stigma around the failing when I'm just with life and with my body.
Yeah. It's one of the foundational things that I teach all of my clients is how to allow those feelings to actually come up and to release them. Because most people, when they experience fear, the default tendency is to repress, to try to push it away, to try to avoid it, to positive talk yourself out of it. And then it just keeps getting triggered and it continues to be that obstacle for you. So this has been a fantastic conversation. And I'm sure that there are people who are really resonating with your style. So can you please tell our listeners how they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. So easiest way is probably to find me on Facebook or Instagram, Miroslav Petrovic. The Enliven Speaking Institute is the website for all my speaking work. So Enliven Speaking Institute, oneword.com. Otherwise, if you're looking to book me for a speaking engagement, Miroslav P is my website. That's Miroslav, P for Peter.com. And yeah, I mean, you can find my email on any one of those websites. But even if you just listen to this and you enjoyed it, just reach out and say hi on Facebook or Instagram. It'd be lovely to connect.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your energy with us. And I have to, of course, thank all of our listeners. If you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.